I've got tears running down my face. I was like, I don't have to go into the Army. He's like, you're gonna fucking go into the Army. He's like, there's nothing here for you. The recruitment videos show you a lot of cool shit. They don't show you some pissed off, 5'5" guy making you get down on his level so he can scream at you. I mean, it's life, and it really is life. I mean, you don't realize it until it happens,
Right.
And then you become very aware of how precious it is. Prepare yourself for things not going your way, because this isn't the military out here.
All right, we're on.
All right.
What's up, Arry?
What's up, man?
Hey, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it, brother. So let's just jump right into it. And why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and about your upbringing, how you were raised.
So, I'm born and raised in Virginia. Born in Galax, Virginia. Father, Larry Weeks, and my mom, Kathy Weeks at the time. My dad was a little bit older than my mom. He was in his 30s, and my mom just had turned 21 when she had me. It was a poor area that I grew up in. Didn't really have a lot of times that I remember growing up. I don't remember a lot of my mom and my dad being together. I stayed with my grandmother quite a bit during their separations and getting back together. One of the biggest issues, my dad was an alcoholic. He was physically abusive to my mother, so there was a lot of seeing that kind of stuff growing up. But with all that said, I mean, I love both of them dearly. My father passed away in 2009. But from the beginning, it was a lot of bouncing around, no real stability until I was 8, and we ended up moving to Roanoke. My mother met a state police officer, and they hit it off. They ended up getting married and moving to Roanoke, and eventually I came with them. It was challenging because, I mean, being a kid, like without stability, there's a lot of times where you kind of you become really, really shy because it's like you don't have a core group of friends that you're growing up with. So I was very, very shy and quiet growing up with all the bouncing around and seeing some of the things that I did as a kid. It just kind of closed me off a little bit. Moving to Roanoke, I met my best friend when I think I was like 10 years old, and we've been friends ever since. But from there, I mean, living in Roanoke, I loved it here. Obviously I was, I had my friends, I started school here, and I think it was 3rd grade. Up until, 7th grade, I was here, and, we would tear shit up all the time and go do skating rink shit every weekend, and just try to have as much fun as possible as being kids. And of course there was always I don't know if it was my mom, there was always some kind of issue in the home. So when my mother and my stepdad had some issues, there was some bouncing around. We left for a couple months and then came back. I think once they ironed things out, my stepdad had enough of Roanoke due to whatever shit that they were going through. And we ended up moving to Stewart's Draft. It's a small little country ass town near Charlottesville and Stanton. And at the time I was pissed off at the world. I had my best friend here that I'd always hung out with, always knew. My dad was only an hour away when we lived in Roanoke, and that changed from being 2.5 hours away. So it was definitely hard. It was hard, not knowing anybody, starting new, in 8th grade, which everybody's fucking awkward.
That's when you moved in 8th grade?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I started 8th grade at Stuart Straff Middle School. And, you know, I wasn't tall yet. I hadn't even begun to grow, but I had like this stupid 90s skater bowl cut with it shaved up underneath. And yeah, everybody thought my hair was cool. So it kind of just, you know, we fit in, and it was different. It was different. Those kids are different than like city kids. Like some of the kids that I went to high school with, like did farm work and shit, you know, milking cows and, you know, baling hay before they even come to work. So, or come to school, not work. But yeah.
Did you play any sports growing up?
Basketball. Like I loved basketball. Started off like you know, I never liked Michael Jordan. My cousins, I have some cousins from Chicago that I actually lived with for a few years, like when I was like 6 or something. And they were huge Chicago everything, like White Sox, Chicago Bulls. Can't stand either one of them. But I saw this guy on TV, Shaquille O'Neal, and I'm a huge Shaq fan. I started watching him through LSU, and then he went to the NBA. I immediately became like an Orlando Magic fan. And so like I would playing you know, with kids in the neighborhood, like, you know, we'd lower the basketball goals down and like play hardcore ball all day long. But that's when I started my love for basketball. I didn't really play any sports prior to that. I mean, your parents put you in baseball. I didn't like baseball, but I loved basketball. So like throughout, you know, middle school into high school, I was all about playing ball. And one big issue is I couldn't keep my grades up. It's because I didn't give a shit about school. Like, to be honest with you, like, school came so easy to me that I could coast by and make my C's and my occasional B and get by and not have to give any effort. But when that translated to playing actual basketball for the high school, I made the freshman team, and then within like 3 months got kicked off because of my grades. So that kind of put a damper to that. But I mean, I played AAU ball. Went to Camfield basketball camp, which is at Washington and Lee University. I think they're changing the name now, but at the time that was really, really cool. But a lot of my time was spent playing basketball. And then I got into cars. I got into cars probably before I had a license. My best friend, who still lived in Roanoke, he got into like the import scene, so I had to have an import. And got really heavy into that. Ended up getting like an Acura Integra as my first car that I bought on my own. And yeah, I love that car. I miss it to this day.
How'd you start getting into cars? What inspired you to get into cars?
Really, just I had a lot of influence from my best friend. Like he was like my big brother. You know, I didn't have any brothers growing up. My dad has 4 biological kids, me, and I have 3 older sisters. He has 3 adopted daughters as well from his second wife's previous marriage. So Jason, he was always like a gearhead. He was always into stuff like that. And I remember the first like real hooked up car that he got was like a 1991 CRX. And it was just like the coolest thing ever. And then he started hanging out with these dudes here locally in Roanoke that started this little car crew called like Team Next Generation. And you know, I just fell in love with it. Like I would come down here in the summers, and when I did have a license, like I would drive down here and hang out with all these dudes that had like the super hooked up cars, like with turbos and superchargers and nitrous, and they race people over here on 581, like racing these fully built up Mustangs and smoking them in like a 4-cylinder, which to me that was so cool. And I just the scene started growing like early in the 90s, like, you know, and my car of choice was, you know, obviously an Acura Integra, and they were just like the coolest thing out. They weren't like a Civic, but they weren't like anything like high end like a Supra or anything, but they were just like right in the middle. They were sexy looking and just smooth to drive, a lot of fun.
I remember those. We're about the same age. I remember everybody was into Acura Integras, man.
Yeah, man. They were, and the goal was to get a Type R, which I never got. I never got a Type R, but I went from that Integra to an RSX Type S, and then my palate, you know, got to the point where I liked more high-end stuff. So after buying an RSX in El Paso, Texas, brand new, still had the plastic on the seats, the wheels, the hood, everything. Watched them pull it off the truck. I put 175,000 miles on the car before it was even paid off. When I traded it in, I got into the Nissan style cars. I got an Infiniti G37, and yeah, I went from there. I didn't really do anything to it. I kind of like, I was getting older, and then I had a kid, so it was like, I went to the side.
Yeah. Did you know what you wanted to do with your life after high school?
Oh no, no, not at all. I don't think any kid really knows what they want to do. You know, with me, I knew that I didn't have the grades to get into college. I knew that I didn't, and that wasn't going to be a possibility. So I initially talked to an Air Force recruiter at a high school, like job fair at our local mall, and passed along some information. I looked up, you know, everything. At that time, like, the internet was basically in its infancy, and you didn't really have like access to go to like all these crazy websites and learn stuff. But I didn't know anybody that was in the Air Force, so I thought that it was a good idea. And the recruiter never called me back. Not one time. I expressed interest. I was like, I'm all for this. Like, I graduate in a year, I'm ready. She never called me back. So I said, fuck it. And I got in my car one day, I drove down, saw the Army recruiter, and we hit it off. Of course, that's their job, is to pitch, and, you know, you're the one that's supposed to, you know, grab, you know, jump all over it. And I did. So after speaking, I think, I can't remember my recruiter's name, the first one. But he showed me pictures of like him in, you know, Egypt, and, you know, over in the Middle East, and, you know, in Japan, and it was just like, damn, you know, these are places that I would love to see.
Right.
You know, like as a kid, a lot of places, specifically Roanoke, the small town that I went to high school in, they have a certain type of living expectation. Like in Stewart's Draft, everybody does factory work. I knew I didn't want to work in a fucking factory. Everybody worked at either Hershey or this place called Nibco, and at the time it was like this place called Hollister, not like the clothing store, but they made like medical grade, you know, masks and, you know, protective equipment. And I just didn't want to do that stuff. And I had a friend, you know, straight out of high school that started with them, and it's just a pain in the ass, like shift work from the time that you start to the time that you get out of it. And it wasn't something that appealed to me. So I went to MEPS and I signed up for a military intelligence job.
Wow.
Which was, I scored really well in the ASVAB. And so it was a imagery analyst. I think it was like 91 Sierra. And I was so excited. I was like, holy shit. Like, these people and, my teachers are thinking that I'm this dumbass because I don't do any of my homework. I just get by doing literally nothing, the bare minimum.
Right.
And I knocked it out of the park on the ASVAB. So I didn't know anything about needs of the Army then. I quickly found out because I signed my contract. Everything was good to go.
What year is this?
This was 1999, going into 2000.
Okay.
And then February of 2000, I got probably the hardest phone call I ever had to get. And my dad had called while I was hanging out with one of my friends. He talked to my mom and asked me to call him when I got home. And my dad told me that he had lung cancer. And as a 17-year-old kid, like that's, me and my dad, we had a very, very hit and miss relationship growing up. There was times that he was there, and then there was times that he wasn't. And all too often, and I'm just being honest, like all too often, my dad chose alcohol and women over everything else. Mm-hmm. So I was hurt by finding out that my dad had cancer. I was pissed off, But then I was like, well, fuck it. Like, I don't really know you, I don't really know you that well. I know you I get to see you maybe once every month and a half, 2 months. Like he had, every other weekend. But I never saw him like that. So I kind of rebelled in my head and just stopped going to school. I mean, I would leave in the mornings. I'd leave in the mornings to go to school and just stop fucking going. I'd fucking go hang out with some car club dude or, hang out with a girl.
This was before getting into the Army?
Yeah, this was before. This was spring of 2000. Well, my dumb ass didn't realize that I needed all 4 of my credits to graduate. All 4 classes in my second semester. Because like I said, I didn't really pay attention to it.
So you signed up already for the
I'd already signed up for the Army.
You still needed to graduate high school?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I signed up before the actual enlistment.
Right.
I'd already picked my job. I did my swearing in, so I was under contract. But when all that happened, everything went out the window. It was like, I'm just gonna do what I need to do to get my mind off all the bullshit, which caused issues with my mother, caused issues with my stepdad. And he's old school, born in 1933, just a hard-nosed, state trooper, did a lot of undercover work. And we started bumping heads, like hard. And so I called my dad and I was like, look, I'm just gonna get my GED. I'm just gonna fucking go in. And then the recruiter told me, hey, this deal's off with a GED. Like, you have to have a diploma. Oh. And I was like, he was like, we can get you a different job, but it's not gonna be what you signed up for. And I was like, fuck that. So I'm talking to my dad and I'm talking to my stepdad and just trying to figure out what I do next. So, I had a job. I worked at a hospital working in X-ray as a file clerk. Nothing really crazy, but just taking X-ray file jackets when a doctor wants them to the doctor and then refiling them. I had that job, and so I had a little bit of money coming in. So it was like $550 because I was just like, I'm not gonna be one of these fucking dudes with a GED. I paid $550 out of pocket to take 2 classes during summer school, and then started my second senior year of high school the next fall for 2 credits. One was only offered in the first semester and one was only offered in the second semester. There was no way around it. I could only take 2 classes in the summer. So I had to go back a full year of high school,
Wow.
embarrassed as shit that I didn't graduate with my class of 2000,
Right.
just to come back and for 2 classes. But it was worth it because I wanted to say, like, hey, at least I've done this. You know, my dad, he had a diploma. My mother, she dropped out of high school. I wasn't going to be subpar.
Right.
So I took the whole year. I busted my ass. I got my grades. I went back to MEPS thinking, hey, this job's going to be here for me now. I've got a great ASVAB. I got my shit together now. And then needs of the Army. Needs of the fucking Army. Like, oh, we have a job for you that's, you know, it's got computers and, you know, satellites and all this other shit. 31 Romeo, which is a multi-channel radio transmissions operator and maintainer. Nothing to do with computers. Band 1 and Band 3 radios, did a lot of like, ComSec, like mobile, short and long range communication, but pissed that I didn't get an Intel job. I really wanted a top secret clearance. I really wanted to have something that I could do outside of the Army. But these guys assured me, these new recruiters assured me that what I was doing was going to be marketable, which hindsight's 20/20, it's not. But so I went in. I didn't want to go at first. At that time, I did all that work, and then I was like having second thoughts, like probably about a week before I'm supposed to get on an airplane for the first time. And me and my stepdad got into a huge fucking fight, like nose to nose. And he's like, I've got tears running down my face. I was like, I don't have to go into the Army. He's like, you're gonna fucking go into the Army. He's like, there's nothing here for you. And that was the smartest decision that I made. I mean, I wasn't happy. We went to MEPS, and I got in the car with Staff Sergeant Drawbond, and he drove me to Richmond, and I flew out the next day from Richmond to, I think, Charlotte, and then from Charlotte to Atlanta. And got picked up in Atlanta, went to basic training at Fort Benning. Scared shitless at that point because, I'm 19 then. I was older than what I should have been to graduate high school, but I was scared. I was definitely scared. I didn't know what to expect because the recruitment videos show you a lot of cool shit. They don't show you some pissed off, 5'5" guy making you get down on his level so he can scream at you. But yeah, so get to the holding company and they tell you, hey, if you got hair, we're gonna shave it off right now. Here's your razor, here's your shaving cream, get rid of all your facial hair. And then we had like a brief little period where I'm almost like embarrassed to admit this shit. There's a week before you actually go to basic. And during that week, they test your physical fitness. They make you do your little push-ups and your sit-ups, like a pre-PT test.
Right.
And these dudes were like kind of nice to you, but kind of not. And so we were able to use the payphones every now and then. And I called my mom. I was like, I don't want to fucking do this. You got to call the recruiter. I want to fucking come home. And so my mom called, and she's cussing out the fucking recruiter, and he just turned around and cussed her right back. He's like, look, your son knew what he was doing when he signed up for this shit. Let him be a man and leave it alone. It's going to be okay. So everything was just like, it was uneasy, it sucked, but getting used to that Georgia heat coming from Virginia. I went into the Army on August 5th of 2001. So After the first week of that holding company, we finally got our chance to what they called go down range. And that's when you actually go to basic training. So these guys rolled up with these, lined up buses, these little Bluebird school bus type things. And we have all of our shit on our shoulders, just waiting in line. And they got people out there taking pictures and everything. And I remember this dude, Drill Sergeant Muldrow, coming over there and screaming at everybody to get on his fucking bus. And we're running, like there's people like tripping and shit because most of us never held two, fucking bags like that, with all your Army shit, all your CIF stuff. We'd pack onto this fucking bus like a bunch of sardines. And this dude starts screaming at the bus driver to turn the fucking air conditioning off, turn the fucking heat on. Ooh. It's 95 degrees in the middle of summer in, Columbus, Georgia. And that's when basic training started. That's when it became real. It became real fast. And it was fun after that. We get down to the company, and they tell us to get off the bus. They start smoking the shit out of us as soon as we get off the fucking bus, like push-ups and roll around, do flutter kicks, all that wild shit. And then they, took us inside to, get into our bunks and figure out where we were going to be sleeping and what they expected of us overall. It was quite the experience. I was nervous. I was scared. And it was a different Army than what it is now. Like then, they would call you everything but your name, everything but private. But it had its purpose, like I said.
Was it a culture shock for you?
Hell yeah. Hell yeah, because you go from everybody's nice, we never, as kids, especially at 19, I'm still a kid, you never realize what the real world is like. You're under this umbrella that your parents have for you. Even if it's fucked up, even if you've had a rough life. And I dealt with my fair share of really fucked up shit. But even through all that, I could have never prepared myself for basic training. It is just unreal. Because you have grown men and women screaming at you like you're this piece of shit. But there's a purpose. They break you down to your bare minimum, and then they slowly build you back up during that 9 to 13 weeks, depending on what you do after basic. And basic got fun. At first I was just like, this is bullshit. But basic got fun there for a minute. We were doing hand-to-hand combat, rolling around in the Goodyear stuff. It's basically like a tire pit, like a bunch of chewed up tires that you're rolling around in so no one hurts themselves and stuff like that. Learning how to do hand-to-hand stuff and, just learning how to square your shit away, obviously keeping your bunks straightened up. Teaches you to pay attention to details, things that could potentially get you killed later on in life. What I think the craziest part about basic for me was the timing that I went in. Because I was in my second week of basic rifle marksmanship, and September 11th happened. And we had dudes, because another culture, like you said, culture shock, you're not just around people from your state or from your town. There's 55 men or young men from all over the world or all over the United States. So we have guys from Jersey, New York, down south in Florida, Louisiana, you got your Texas boys, you got your California guys that are too cool for school. You have a melting pot of so many different cultures all at one time that you don't experience until that point.
Right.
And it made the world small. September 11th, the morning of September 11th, second week of BRM, and we're out there, they're giving a safety brief, and then all of a sudden, fucking helicopter starts flying in, and they land. The drill sergeants are getting on their radios, like, they're telling us to all get in formation. Like, you have like 3 or 4 fucking companies, 2 different battalions, like, per, range, like for the entire range, you got all these people lined up. We had no idea what was going on. And at first, I don't know if he was a 1-star, maybe a 2-star general. He came out there and addressed us to let us know that the United States had been attacked. And we were like, what the fuck? What do you mean we've been attacked? And the intel that early, because it was after the first plane hit, was that we had been bombed. We had been bombed, or there was a missile, something. There was no like clear details about what was going on. And you got a bunch of scared kids.
Right.
And he stopped talking for a minute. The drill sergeants were like kind of like, getting everybody in order, and then he got new intel. And he was like, terrorists hijacked planes and they flew into the towers in New York City. You got grown men fucking bawling their eyes out. Dudes that I was in, that were in my platoon, whose parents lived in the city, whose aunt worked in the tower, and it was just overwhelming.
Must have seemed unreal.
Overwhelming fucking emotion. Like, it was hard to like see that. And the first thing that they're like, we're going to war. This turns real quick, because when you sign up for the military, you're either doing it for schooling, you're doing it to get away from home, but you never anticipate actual war or the potential that you could die. So that's when it became fucking real. They're like, your orders, fuck all that shit. Your AIT shit, you're going to fucking infantry school.
Now you're a grunt.
Yeah, now you're a grunt. Fuck what your contract says. You're a grunt first. And we honestly believe that shit. So we started training like it. You saw people lock in, like really, none of the joking shit no more. It was locked in. Like paying attention to like how the M16 works, how to manipulate it, how to make sure that you're going to be efficient if you have to use it. Really pushing yourself to overcome, like, I'm terrified of fucking heights. Terrified of heights. But doing the confidence courses, like me and this other kid broke down. He's like in tears. He's like fucking climbing up the rope, going across these beams, going all the way up to the crow's nest, and then coming over the top and coming down the cargo net. Like, we just decided to push ourselves. Like, and everybody kind of like, that was the first time that I'd really seen cohesion among Americans. Now, granted, we're in the military, we're in basic training. That's what they're teaching us. But apparently, not only was it happening with us, it was happening all around the United States. People were coming together for the first time in a long time for a common cause. And people were more, I guess they love their country more. They were pissed off that this ever happened.
You hear, let me know if you've heard this, but I've heard plenty of times that everybody, nobody ever wishes for September 11th again, but everybody wishes for a September 12th because of all the unity.
Of course. And like, that's true today. Like our country, and I'm not gonna get political, our country is divided. And there was a time where every fucking house on the street had an American flag out front, because we all endured it together, you know?
Right.
And the whole never forget thing stood true for a long time until it didn't. And now we're living in times where I feel like it doesn't matter as much now, you know? It's watered down. People don't remember it. People don't think about it. People have their own opinions on it now. But America's changed. In some ways for the better.
So what happened, what happened after boot camp?
After boot camp, I graduated basic training the day before my 20th birthday. And it was crazy because I hadn't seen my mom and my dad in the same room with each other since I was like, I don't know, 7. They didn't, like my father didn't come to my high school graduation. So my mom drove me to AIT. I went to Fort Gordon, Georgia, which is just,
AIT?
yeah.
What's that?
AIT is your technical training.
Okay.
So whatever job you sign up for in the military, AIT is advanced initial training. So you go to AIT to learn how to do the job. In my position would be communications, like the 31 Romeo position. It's basically school. You go to school to learn how to do your job that you'll be doing in the Army. So my job was to go to class every day and learn how multi-channel radio transmission systems worked, how to, debug systems, how to troubleshoot problems, and that, was in Fort Gordon, which is in Augusta, Georgia. So right up the road, it's about an hour and a half north of Columbus, Georgia, which is where Fort Benning is. And it was just what you would expect it to be, like schooling. Classroom stuff, Monday through Friday. You still did your PT in the mornings. You still had drill sergeants, but they were not as hardcore as the guys that were screaming at you for 9 weeks prior. They still scream at you, but it's just kind of like, okay, you guys aren't real drill sergeants, you're just AIT drill sergeants. But I mean, they were still legitimate, badass dudes, but yeah, so AIT, I was in Fort Gordon from October to February of 2002. So October of 2001 till February of 2002. And AIT is basically like, once you learn your job and you get proficient at it, then you get orders. At the time, the main people, there was no stateside assignments really. If you got lucky, you would get stationed stateside. But most of it was OCONUS, which is outside the continental United States. A lot of guys got sent to Korea. I got orders for Germany to be with 32nd Signal Battalion out of Darmstadt, Germany, which they no longer exist now. But I was excited. That's when the Army became real fucking fun, real fast. Like, yeah, you do your job, but once you get into the regular Army, when it's not in training, it's pretty fun. There's a lot of like cool stuff that goes on. Yeah. Barracks life. Not only that, but 20 years old, living in a country that I'd only read about, that was going to be exciting for me. So I did my little 1 week stint at home, said my goodbyes, got on a plane in Richmond, went to DC and across the pond. And I remember the first night I got into Germany. Like, we got off the plane and they take us to this little training post in Frankfurt. Frankfurt, at the time, I don't think that they had any they had like a bunch of admin folks, but it was right next to the airport. It was basically just to in-process you. If your unit wasn't available to come pick you up, which my unit was in the field when I got there, so I stayed there for a week. And there was no rules. There was no formations. It was like basically being in a hotel for a week. Go to sleep, here's your key, get up, you got breakfast, the chow hall's here. But everything else, go have fun.
Wow.
That's what we did. Like, I met a bunch of like random dudes, like this kid that was at, Fort Leonard Wood, I guess, like he was a tanker, for his basic and AIT, and some other kids like from different, I just remember the one dude. But we went downtown Frankfurt, just sticking out like sore thumbs. All of us have high and tights. All of us, right, obviously in pretty good shape at the time. Just walking around getting drunk for the first time, legally, because there's no drinking age in Germany. If you can sit at the bar and you can pick the glass up, you can drink it. So we had a blast for like 5 straight days. But a lot of other things I witnessed for the first time. Like, I wasn't experienced, in seeing like drug use. But in Germany is the first place that I saw like somebody passed out with a heroin needle in their arm, laid up on the sidewalk. That was the first time I'd ever seen it. It's also the first time that I'd ever really experienced racism, because we, the tank kid, like, we went to a bar, or what we thought was a club, and the guy says, no N-words allowed. And this is in fucking Germany in 2002.
Wow.
And we're like, what do you mean? Like, this dude's ready to fight, and I can understand why, like, but we don't see it because we're, like I said earlier, like, we're protected from it. We're under this umbrella that the world is fair. It might be fucked up, but it's fair. But you learn real quick that it's not, and that was hard to swallow. It was hard to like realize, like, damn, we're almost 1,000 miles away, or maybe more, away from the East Coast of the United States. And this is the first fucking experience we have, That was rough, and finding out quickly, like, how bad other countries hate us as Americans. I think that probably had a lot to do with it as well. But generally, like, what I saw is that most European countries, most countries all over the world, don't really have a high regard for Americans, especially near a military installation, because those guys are generally loud and obnoxious and walking around like they have something to prove. But Darmstadt was, other than those experiences, like, obviously they were pretty significant. Darmstadt was fucking amazing. Found out about a program that the military was running then called BOSS, which is like Better Opportunities for Single Soldiers. And so every month they did a new trip. And granted, as a brand, I was at E3, at the time. We don't really get paid that much. Right. And even being, in Germany with the cost of living allowance, it's still not shit money. But for $125 for these trips, they would bus you down or bus you to any place that you want to, as long as it's in the list of trips they have approved. So the first trip that I went on was to Verona, Italy.
Oh, wow.
I had the opportunity to go to Venice, but I chose to stay in Verona because I wanted to go to the beach. And the Jesolo beach it's on the Mediterranean Sea. And it was just like I said, there's so many things that like I'd only read about that I wanted to see and experience. And this dude, Sam, he was the boss rep that we had. And he was like, man, you got to keep going on these trips. Like, The first one's in Italy. It's $125. 4-star hotel. Only thing that you have to take care of is your food, which was a challenge because in Germany, we learn, when we go in process, they put you through like a training to learn how to understand some of the German language, at least read, the road signs, because you have to get a license as well to drive like Humvees and stuff on the road. So you go through like some culture training. But German, like those guys, like they can speak English to you, they just choose not to. So if you try their language, then they'll talk to you. Italy was a whole different story because no one speaks English. And Italian is kind of like Spanish in a way. It has like some of the same verbs and nouns, but it does sound totally different. So finding food, it was basically like going fast food the whole time that you're there and getting really, really drunk. Going to bars and clubs, but also seeing cool stuff, like seeing like ruins that are underneath the ground in Verona, Italy. Going to like the Capulet house that you read about in Romeo and Juliet, like the Capulet house is really there. So seeing that level of like, because the United States is relatively young, it's only a couple hundred years old. Seeing something that's been there for thousands of years was unreal to me at the time. So we had a lot of fun with it. Like I went on these trips. I went to to Italy, to France, Belgium, Amsterdam. Me and a bunch of buddies drove to England. It was, at the time the exchange rate was insane, so it was $175 to ferry across the English Channel to get into England. But England by far is probably, next to Italy, my favorite place that I ever went. It helped that they spoke English, but it's where we came from. It's where the people that made America, like when we, made our own country, we stuck our fingers up to these people, and seeing that history was insane too. And talking to British folks, like they still call us, well, at the time, they were still referring to us as the colonies. It was funny. It was just the different cultures that you get to experience, the things that you get to see. That's worth the whole military experience. Yeah. And granted, I was only in Germany for like 11 months. 11 months, I did everything that I could. I saw as much shit as I could, experienced as many new things as possible. Got addicted to doner kebabs if you've never had one. There's a place in St. Petersburg, Florida called Berlin's Doners. Authentic. And they're absolutely amazing. You smack somebody for one. Like lamb and beef. Yeah, that's where it's at.
How long did you do in the Army?
I went 4 years.
4 years?
Mm-hmm. From August of 01 to August of 05. After my time, because like I said, I was in Germany for about 11 months, went to Iraq, first Kuwait in the beginning of 2002, and did my tour in Iraq, came back to Germany in 04, and then back stateside. I ended up being in El Paso, Texas at Fort Bliss, which is also kind of like a melting pot. A lot of nationalities, a lot of different folks, and a lot of places close by that I'd never seen that I always wanted to see. I had an aunt that lived in Phoenix, Arizona, so I'd regularly get on Southwest Airlines flights and go to Phoenix to visit her. Me and my buddy, after going to Fort Polk, Louisiana for training for 30 days, as soon as we got back, packed up the car, San Diego, California, with a pit stop in Phoenix to visit some of his college buddies, drink all night, get up the next morning super early. And then my first time to California, and I don't know if obviously you've lived there, but driving from Arizona into California, like when you start going up the mountains, and then after you crest the mountains, like you see like all this like, you see city and you see the ocean, and it was pretty wild, you know.
Backing up a little bit, what was your tour in Iraq like?
It was intense. So we trained at Camp Virginia for about three weeks. We got a lot of prep done, getting our vehicles ready, making sure that we're going over the rules of engagement just in case of anything. We didn't really have any idea of who we were going to get attached to. So at the time, they were floating around this idea of starting LSA Adder, which ended up being LSA Anaconda, which was in Balad. So our CO ended up talking to some folks, and we got attached to 3rd ID, the 3rd Infantry Division out of Fort Stewart, Georgia. And we were to provide communication support for them. Now, we weren't going to be directly with them. They were going to be quite a bit ahead of us, but they had the same kind of radio equipment that we did. Our job was to set up the antennas and relay the messages from Iraq to Kuwait, which we did. It was crazy early on. I mean, our CO didn't know where the fuck we were going, and so we were driving down, driving through the desert. This was the day of crossing the border into Iraq, because the night before we're all lined up. You have probably miles of military vehicles, different units from all over the United States, even Europe. You've got Brits out there. You've got Australian dudes. You got some, I don't know if it was Koreans or not, maybe some South Koreans. But you had a lot of different militaries staging in the same time. So pushing in, and it's just like dusty, it's just hectic, crazy. You don't know what to expect because now shit's real. All the stuff that you've trained for, like the months of preparation, and now that we're attached to like a legitimate unit, we're not just some funny unit, just like a legitimate unit. We didn't know what to expect. We're just commo guys, But our CO got lost, so we set up, a perimeter. We laid out concertina. We're digging foxholes and putting up antennas, and it hadn't been cleared by EOD, which explosive ordnance disposal was supposed to clear any place that we were to set up shop. They didn't clear that area, so we were there for only a night. We did like our guard duty, wearing nods, scanning sectors all night long, like in shifts, to make sure nothing happened. There was like little Bedouins that were like camped out, like that lived in basically like a tent in the middle of the fucking desert with their camel, and it was scary, because you don't know what to expect. And the fact that we didn't know that it hadn't been cleared by EOD until after the fact, a lot of people were fucking pissed. But then when we did figure out where we were going, we ended up at Talil Air Base, which is pretty close to Al Nazariya, where Marines were putting it to them, like pretty hard. So we set up shop there for probably a month and a half, 2 months. At that point in time, we were still wearing chem suits. So the night before, we had to put on chem suits. I think it was like MOP 2. So we didn't have over boots on, we didn't have gloves, we didn't have anything covering our Kevlars, but it was the parka and the pants. Luckily, they let us wear PT shorts underneath because it was like 110 degrees every fucking day. And
that it was 110 degrees without the MOP suits.
Yeah, yeah. So no showers either. We don't have running water. We have buffalo water, which obviously it's potable water that has some bleach tablets in it that make it drinkable. But that sits in a metal tank all day getting super hot. But going 45 days without a shower, dude, that was tough. That was gross. Back when I had hair, like I'd had sand caked in my hair nonstop. I felt just disgusting. So when I finally got the ability to peel that thing off, because we hit up the hot spots, with baby wipes and stuff, but it was nothing like taking a real shower. When we got the all clear on the chemical threat, peeled that thing off, and it was like 8 o'clock at night, and I didn't give a shit who was around. I bought these 2 wash tubs from the PX in Kuwait, just in case. And I had some shampoo and I had some body wash, and I put the tubs out there. I filled them both up with buffalo water. And I knew, even though I wasn't clean, I felt clean. I stripped down, got in one, soaped up, cut a water bottle in half, rinsed myself off, and then, got in the clean water and really fucking got to it. The first time I felt, it was a relief. It was like, oh shit. I've been nasty as hell for 45 days, and now I get to put on the same shit that I just took off after washing my ass. So
when you were out there, did it ever cross your mind, like your appreciation for what you've had back home?
Oh, for sure. We didn't have anything was cold. We were drinking hot water bottles, which, sat out in the sun all day. We didn't have access to anything but MREs. So I ate 3 MREs a day. I drank probably 6 bottles of water a day. Sweat my ass off all day. The comforts of life, you definitely think about at that point in time. Like the things that you don't have. Like hot food, like fresh hot food.
Or a shower. Or a shower.
They finally set up a shower tent, but you had to wait in line for an hour just to be able to take a actual hot shower. But air conditioning, things that you just don't think about, you learn to appreciate the smallest little things. And we had Marines that came over there. Luckily, what my job entailed in the long run was to set up communication. So we had phones, and granted, it would take you about 45 minutes of trying to dial a toll-free number, or to get to a switch that could dial a toll-free number for you using a calling card. But giving people the ability to call home. We'd have random people just come out of nowhere, SF dudes with no name plates on, just rolling up, full beard. Hey, can I use your phone? Yeah, no problem. That kind of stuff, Marines coming through, because at Talil, it was an air base. They had a detention center there where they had some detainees. But the majority of that base, it was south of Baghdad. I think it was about 45 minutes to an hour south of Baghdad. But there was a whole lot of different people there. The Aussies were there. They had Air Force dudes there in their air-conditioned tents, while everybody else was sweating their balls off. But that was, it definitely made you think about how easy life is outside of being there.
Let's talk about getting out after having gone through all that. What was life like transitioning back into civilian life?
It was very, very hard. So part of the reason, I love the Army, and I had planned on staying in. I just wanted to reclass. I didn't want to do commo anymore. I wanted to get into something where I felt like I was really going to be helping people. So I tried to reclass as a nurse. They told me that I didn't have one of the prerequisites. The Army waives a lot of things. They didn't waive the prerequisite for chemistry. So I didn't get to reclass. And, I was talking to my dad about it. My dad came out to visit me in El Paso, Texas, probably about 4 months before I got out. And he was like, I just think it's time for you to come home, you know? And I was like, but I love this shit. Like, I'm having so much fun. I love the life. I'm moving up in rank. Like, I'm thinking about making a career out of it,
Right.
you know? I'd already done almost 4 years. I might as well see what 4 more is gonna be like. And, you know, at the time they were offering me quite a hefty bonus because of retention. But my dad, it was just something that stuck out to me about him. Like, he was kind of pushing for me to get out of the Army. And, you know, I did, to make sure that I wasn't going to do anything that I didn't want to do, and to kind of give life a try on the civilian end. And that in itself is a culture shock. Leaving structured military life, where you know what's going to happen from, you know, 6:30 a.m. till 4:30 in the afternoon. You know what to expect. You know that you're going to have 3 hot meals every day. You know that you're going to have someplace to live that no one's going to take away from you. You know that there's that security blanket that the military provides for you. And once you're out, you no longer have that. So when I first got out, my dad, he was a, you know, carpenter, had a little construction, you know, company or whatever. At that time, you know, only having one lung, he had a bunch of people. He worked more as a consultant than anything else. So he had people that worked for him that would actually do the manual labor. Like, he would do some of it, but with one lung, it was hard for him to get around and do things. So I worked with him for about 6 months. I tried finding jobs relating to what I did in the military. So I went to job fairs like every month in DC, Northern Virginia. I met with Raytheon, the DIA. I had an interview with the CIA. But one thing I didn't have was a top secret clearance, you know? And my job skills didn't translate to any of the civilian sector stuff that they had available. Until I got a big break. You know, a friend of mine worked for Sprint in Ashburn, Virginia. And I went up there to visit. She got me an interview. The guy who was doing the interview, the boss, was retired Air Force. So we hit it off great. So a young kid, you know, like 23 years old, wanting to live in DC. My dad wasn't a fan of it. He was like, I think it's too far away, like the cost of living is expensive. They were starting me off at $28 an hour. For a 23-year-old man, that's a lot of money coming from the military.
Right.
And I was like, hell yeah, I'm all about it. I had to do it through a staffing agency. He said, like, you know, after 3 months, they would hire me on full time. So go through the process, you know, fill out all my information, process it through Kelly Services, and something came back. It came back that I had lied on my application. And I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea that a misdemeanor in Virginia was a reckless driving, which I had a couple of them from the racing days. And I'd put that I'd never been convicted of any kind of crimes. That barred me from employment. So I was like all excited, hyped up, getting ready to like trying to find an apartment in DC or in Ashburn, which was crazy. And then it all fell apart with the quickness.
Wow.
Like there was no second chance, like, hey, you lied on your application according to them. I understand that you didn't know, you know, but I can't hire you now. So freaking out, I didn't want to do construction with my dad. He wanted me to go, you know, work for the post office or work for the Radford Arsenal. And just, I didn't want to do that. So some car crew buddies, they had been working for this company called ACF here in Roanoke. It had started, I think, in 2000, doing debt collection, and my buddy got me an interview, and that was my very first like legitimate job after having some heartbreak because I wanted to live in DC so bad. after some heartbreak, I got this job here in Roanoke, and I did great at it. That's one thing that I can say, like the military gave me the confidence to know that I can do any job that I want and be good at it, because I'm going to try hard and I'm going to do what I need to do. So I was very successful at that job, but after 2 years, it's a hustle type of job, and I mean I'm back with it now. But then it was just I was so young. I just wanted to go all over the place. I wanted to do things. I wanted to go to the bars. I wanted to hang out with girls and hang out with my friends, and work was just a paycheck to allow that all to happen. So I decided to reach out to an Army buddy of mine that I knew from El Paso. He got me, his mother lived in Delaware, and she worked at this place called CNMRI, which was a neurological practice, but they had a sleep lab. And so he put in a good word for me, and I moved to Delaware on a whim to be a sleep technologist.
Oh, wow.
And so I did that. I loved it. It was 3 12-hour shifts. The rest of the time I was off. I got to go to New York City for the first time, Philadelphia, like all these places are so close by. It's like, Delaware was just like a central hub. So I got to have fun up there, but my job only required me to work 3 days. So I had, 4 days to do whatever I wanted to. And I did that job, and I loved it and everything. But my dad, before I went back to saying that my father had said that, he thought that I should get out of the Army. And I think that my dad knew that he was sick, and he got cancer again. He called me when I was in Delaware and let me know that he had got cancer again, and that this time it wasn't something that they were going to be able to get rid of. The lung cancer, obviously the operation, but he had T-cell lymphoma. The T-cell lymphoma had moved relatively fast through his body and pretty much killed off his immune system. So during the time, keep in mind, I'm living in Delaware. I didn't know my buddy's mom like that. It was just me living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Delaware by myself and working. But to deal with all that by myself was very, very hard. So my father passed away in 2009. At that point, I'd never dealt with any kind of separation anxiety from the military. I missed it, I always missed it. But I had a really tough time after losing my dad. I went through depression. And I think old things that I never let bother me before, because I never lost anybody like that significant to me. Yes, I've had buddies, when I was in El Paso, Texas, there was a buddy that committed suicide.
Was he a vet?
Yeah, he was in the Army. He was in the Army with me at the time.
Yeah.
That was the first military funeral that I'd ever been to. But losing somebody who, I'd went all these years without having a relationship with my dad, and then those last 6 years of his life, he was like my best friend, and to have that ripped away, it was pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh. It's life. It really is life. You don't you don't realize it until it happens,
Right.
And then you become very aware of how precious it is,
What would you say to somebody, today, 23, 24-year-old, depending on how long they served in the military, getting out, maybe they've seen some combat, maybe they went overseas, and maybe they didn't see combat, but just they're accustomed to military lifestyle, coming out. There's a pattern of veterans finding it difficult to transition into civilian life. I'm just curious on what type of advice would you give transitioning in?
I think the biggest thing is that what we're not taught in the military is to save your money. It's all about the quick, getting a car that you can't afford, pissing your money away on things that don't matter, like clothes, or just being done with it. I think the military should probably teach classes on how to maintain your finances, because a lot of vets get out and they're dead fucking broke. Even with combat money, they get out and they're fucking broke. The system is designed like around these these installations to prey on vets or prey on military. Like back then it was Pioneer auto loans that they'll give you that new Mustang, but it's 125% interest rate, I think managing your finances, having a plan in place, don't rely on ACAP to do these things for you. Get as much learning that you can do while you're in. The military will pay for you to do stuff like Microsoft classes and C+, get you into something that's a marketable field. Prepare yourself for things not going your way, because this isn't the military out here. It's a totally different ballgame. People don't really give a fuck that you're in the military. That's the truth of how things really are. You'll have the people that thank you for your service and that stuff, but it's a different animal. So take care of your money, have a plan, get someone to help you build a resume that's going to translate to civilian life. That's pretty much all that I can say. Be prepared for things to not go your way, but be smart enough to know that there's always, when one door closes, another one opens. And as long as you're optimistic and you're smart about things, you maintain your finances. I can't stress that enough. Because you can't do shit without credit. You can't buy anything if you don't have the money saved. You always need to have that cushion. That's what I would say. Solid
advice. Well, before we cut the tape, you got any last words? That was some solid advice right now. Anything else you'd like to say before we close it out?
Just life is a journey, and it's all in what you make it. You have the ability to see some very, very beautiful things. For me, having a family, having a son, that was the greatest accomplishment of my life. I would suggest that you just be smart about things. And I don't know what to say here, man.
Hey, we appreciate you coming here and telling your story, brother.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Push it to the limit, I can't go no more. Red light, no way, I'm coming back home. Long dirt road, all on my own. I'ma be the greatest, write my name in the stone. Write my name in the stone. Yeah, I'm coming